Good morning. Good morning. 14 months ago, I stepped down from being moderator here at the men's club, not because I wasn't enjoying it, but because I promised my dear wife that I would finish my memoir. And so as I left, I said, well, hopefully one day I'll get it finished and I might come back as a speaker for the men's club. And lo and behold, here it is today. And I thank you for the opportunity, guys. Now, I understand, Bob and the committee, that I have two hours. Is that it? No, I couldn't last 2 hours. Couldn't last 2 hours. In fact, I had a presentation on Saturday night, and about 3 a.m. Saturday morning, I woke up and I had no voice. So rather than load pumpkins at the patch for our church on Saturday, I ended up going to Stoneman's Clinic, and they gave me a whole series of things to take, and their final admonishment was, now just don't talk. And I said, no, but I got to talk. And they said, well, I said at 4 o'clock, and they said, well, don't talk until you have to talk. And so Gudrun has promised that if I run out of voice today, because I'm still, as you can hear, struggling with it, she's going to take over, because she's heard every story and joke that I've ever written, and she finishes them better than I do, let me tell you. The real story. There you go. Good to see you, Bob. Good to see everybody. Now, what I plan to do, seriously, is to talk for about a half an hour about the book and share a few stories, and then stop. And what I'll do is stop for questions at that point, and then ask you, are there any others that you would like to hear? Because the 54 stories in this little volume that I have worked 10 years on fit actually in 12 different categories. And the categories they're talked about on the back of the book, the categories are victories, losses, celebrations, despair, triumphs, failures. The other categories are my scariest moments, my happiest moments, my saddest moments, my funniest moments, my proudest moments, and my most profound moments. So at the end of the time of the few stories that I'll tell in the beginning, I'll come back and say, if we have time, and if you still have an interest after you've heard one of the beginning stories, then I'll say, which kind of stories would you like to hear? Because I'd love to share as many as you'd like to hear. But I'm always best, and I feel that meeting is best when the group drives the time frame. So it's not like I keep going on. It's like if you have an interest in more, that's where we'll go. But I promised we will be through by 3, right?
Deane, let me just interrupt you for 1 second.
Sure.
I got pressure this morning as I was walking out. Carolyn said, what if he does go on for 2 hours? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm just going to have to use the gavel. And she said, well, God, don't be rude. And I said, well, I won't, but he's had to do it to others too. So.
Oh boy, have I ever. We used to have a skyhook where we could pull speakers off the stage. Okay, I'm going to tell a quick story in the beginning, and hopefully you'll see the connection between the story and the book. Okay, it's a story, and some of you have heard it before, but because your memory is as bad as mine, you probably forgot it by now. But it's a story of paratroopers, like the 82nd Airborne, and they're known for going through some pretty strenuous physical training at Fort Benning, and then all of a sudden it's jump day. And so the story starts about 12,000 feet above Fort Benning, where there's 10 new jump recruits, and this is their day. This is the first time they're going to jump. So the guy on the end of the line says, Sarge, I can't jump today. I had a bad night last night. I'm just not going to be able to make it. And the sergeant says, this is jump day. You're going to make it. And he said, no, I can't. I don't have it together. And he said, well, you better get it together. He said, well, remind me one more time. What do I do? Okay, you jump out of the plane. You count 10. You pull the cord. The chute opens. You drift to ground. And there is a 2.5 ton truck with a corporal with a 2-day pass. What happens if the chute doesn't open? Well, you count 10, you pull an emergency cord, emergency chute opens, you drift to ground, different truck, different corporal, 5-day pass. No, I can't do it. So he's finally the last one in line, and lo and behold, the sergeant boots him out the window, and you can see him going through the air. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, pulls the cord, no chute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, pulls the emergency cord, no chute. He looks down, he says, I bet you that goddamn truck won't be there either. So the connection between the book and that story is I went into writing this starting 10 years ago. I was kind of buoyed with a little bit of optimism when I had my first Adrift in Memories published in this little Cape Cod View. That was 2008. And I said, my God, I write to the point where somebody might want to read it. And so that gave me a shot of optimism. But then I was very ambivalent because I was filled with doubts. I had written 2 other books using the traditional publishing method, meaning that I went to agents and I thought I knew what rejection was all about until I got to my 84th agent, who finally, Lori Harper out of San Francisco at the St. Petersburg Writers Conference, said, Deane, I like this book. This has got real promise. It's something that parents and children need, and I'm going to back it. I'm going to take it around the publishing industry. So she took it for about a year around the ever-changing publishing industry. Got a lot of good reactions, got a lot of good feedback. I still have in my files the positive letters that those publishing people sent. But they weren't looking for a no-name. They weren't looking for an unknown guy that had no marketing platform. He wasn't Deane Woodward. He was Deane Woodward, everybody, unfortunately, 750,000 copies in the first week. But I don't touch that. I don't want to go that way. I don't want to go that topic. But anyway, so they weren't looking for somebody that's unknown, so that nobody picked it up. And the second book I wrote when I got here on the Cape somewhere around 2001 was I realized that I probably wasn't the only one that had flunked retirement, that many were kind of wondering what are they going to do if they're blessed with longevity with the last 30 years of their life. And so I thought, I know, I have a winner. But it was also rejected. I still wasn't known as a figure. So, but anyway, the optimism, the doubts came from, okay, I said, that's the traditional route, going through an agent to the publishers. I'm going to go with an independent publisher. So I had never done it before, didn't know whether it would work, didn't know what the quality of the person. I'd gotten a recommendation from somebody who just published his book through this agency, so I had that kind of hope and confidence. But anyway, long story short, the SDP publishing truck was there. They were terrific. And Lisa Akuri Ross and her staff of editors from California to all over gave me a running over when it came to my grammar, punctuation, straightened me out in terms of any facts that weren't right. They were a terrific ally. And on page 300 in the book, I recognize about 15 other people who were computer experts or other kinds of resources that helped me put together. If I had not been for these other people, it wouldn't be anything like this. But they raised the level of quality of what I was trying to say, I think, significantly. So I felt very proud of it. Anyway, many people ask, well, who inspires you to write it, and what inspires you to write it? Well, the who inspired me, it's a very quick, easy answer. 3 women and 3 men. The 3 women were my dear wife, Gudrun, my mother, and my sister. Gudrun, God bless her, ends up 10 years ago saying, you know, you keep telling these stories and they're great, but you know, our children and our grandchildren don't know anything about what you've done. They don't know about your life. Why don't you just get it down? Keep repeating it, but put it down in writing. Put it down. And so she not only encouraged me that way, but she also read everything I wrote and gave me plenty of feedback on it, some of which she said, get rid of this. This is not worthy of anything. And but now she's turned into a voracious marketing sales director. As you may have heard this morning or seen already this morning, I used to be able to tell stories to people that were relevant during a conversation, but now she stops me. She said, don't tell that. Have them read the book. You know? And then if I get into the story, she said, well, don't give them the punchline at least. Would you stand up, dear, and get a little recognition for being... The second woman was my mother. And my mother, God bless her, at 97, one day I asked her, Ma, what's the key to longevity? And she looked at me right in the eye and she said, stay active. And so this book is one of several ways that I have tried to stay active over the last few years. The third person is my sister Connie, and Connie stood here on the other side of the room back a couple of years ago when she wrote her memoir above and beyond Wellfleet. And she gave a very emotional, compassionate kind of speech, and many people loved it. So I figured if my little sister, 9 years younger, can do one, I must be able to do one. Okay, the three guys that influenced me were John Potter, Dan McCullough, and Marty Sandler. John Potter was the fellow that in 1976 called me. We just met in a meeting in New York with Union Carbide, and he said, "Deane, I need you to come out for 8 weeks to Asia, India, South America, and do some management system consulting." And so I said, "My God, you know, I haven't been out of the States forever. I'd been up in Canada and down in Mexico, but I hadn't really done that anyway." So long story short, I worked with him for probably 8 years doing consulting with Union Carbide on the management system, and it was wonderful. But also, he wrote 4 books, and one of which was his memoir, terrific book. And he also wrote, after graduating from Harvard and being in the Navy as an officer, he set up his own diving operation. So he wrote a book, a definitive book on all the diving operations and all the treasure ships that are found around the world. Incredible. So he was a real inspiration. The second guy is, I don't know about you, but on Sunday morning when I pick up the Sunday Times, the first story I go to is Dan McCullough. I just happen to like his stories and the way he writes and the messages and the strength of where he's coming from. So he ended up, in addition to being quite a writer, being quite a speaker and teacher, he wrote a memoir. And he has a little interest in sailing too, so I found that very interesting. And finally, our buddy, who most everybody here knows, is Marty Sandler. And if you don't know him, Marty Sandler is now over 80, and he's written over 80 books. So I say, if Marty, over 80, can write 80, can't I write one? You know. And so anyway, those were the guys. Now, what inspired me? As I said earlier, Goodwin said, write it for the kids, write it for the kids. And I started that way, but then I finally said, now wait a minute, when I think about my 30 physical moves around the country, and I think about things that I learned, not only from those trips, but those jobs and those experiences, I learned some stuff. I learned some stuff that I did not know before I got into some of these experiences. And so why don't I make sure I use as a litmus test for the stories that make this book, lessons learned. And so at the end of every one of the 54 stories, I've got down lessons learned. And I do that, so my purpose in the book now, as I've come to understand it, is it's to provide a description of experiences and then lessons learned that might help other people that it may be coming close to some of those passes or journeys, have some thinking on ways that they could approach it differently, to help people get the most out of their life. And so that's what has inspired me. And so what's the book about? Well, the book is about adrift and memories, lessons learned leading a nomadic life. And the nomadic is obviously 30 moves. But what else it's about, when I show the front cover, people say, "Is that you? Are you really that young?" And I say, "You bastard." That's me. That's 19 years old, and the story in here is my best summer job ever. And if we have time, I'll come back and tell it. It's about my being a crew member with another kid from Dartmouth and a Coast Guard captain of this incredibly historic 72-foot schooner out of Marblehead, Mass. Most incredible summer job I ever had. The back one, and how many of the America's Cup crew from the men's club are here today? Burke? Okay. Okay, well, what this represents, this is a picture of the American Eagle, a 12-meter America Cup yacht going along in Newport last summer. And it's out of my story, When Is It Over? And it's one of the items on my bucket list, and that is to get back aboard this America Cup boat and go from the worst position. See, when I first was on it in Lake Ontario for the Race of the Great Lakes, because I was the last guy signed aboard, I got the worst job. I was coffee grinder up in the bow. So when they turned into 15-foot waves down, we would go under the water, and then we'd come up and we'd go down. I said, well, I'm going to go back on that thing, but I'm going to come back to be at the wheel, to feel what it's like to run. So this is a bucket list story here. And So anyway, that's one way to look at what the book is about. The other way is people say, well, is it a sailing book? You just got nothing but sailors on here. And so the parts, there's 8 parts to the book. First, so it really covers my life. First one is my childhood. So I got 9 stories growing up. Second one is early adulthood, college, summer jobs in the Army. Third is marriage, working, and parenting. Fourth is divorced, bachelorhood, downsized, and blindsided. Next one is reunited, sailing, international work. And the 5th one is second marriage, career peaks. And then sailing, dairy, my dear daughter that the book is dedicated to, that I lost to a hot air balloon crash. Family growth and international travel. And then finally, retirement, new starts, reunions, and giving back. So it covers the highlights of my life. And it's been a fun ride. So what I'd like to do now is really just start with a story or two and give you a sense of where I'm coming from. And the first one I think most everybody in this room will relate to because it's for people that are over 50. Would everybody that's over 50 raise their hands? And like you say, we agreed. Is there anybody that doesn't? No. How about over 60? How about over 70? How about over 80? How about over 90? How about over 100? All right. But we've got a lot of wisdom and age here, okay? So my first story is I flunked retirement. I flunked retirement. And so this is what it looked like for me. On January 25th, 2002, I was 65, and I was fully eligible for a full, what I thought, luxurious retirement of leisure. You know, I had worked for 45 years in 5 companies, been in the Army a couple of times, and I figured I am ready to relax and just do nothing. You know, play tennis, go boating, golf, do the things I wanted to do, period. And so in that first spring, we went back to where we lived for 5 years in my job back down in Florida, in Clearwater. So we went down and we visited friends, and we stayed for a couple of months. And on the way down, we visited family in New York and Connecticut and Richmond, Virginia. And on the way back, we did the same thing, but we had a nice time. We came back early that year because and I got the boat in the water early that year in May, which I'd never been able to do because of work commitments. And so we had a wonderful summer boating and traveling and reunions on the Cape, and it was terrific. And then all of a sudden, it was September 4th, Labor Day weekend. And the neighbors were packing up their cars, but it wasn't to go to the beach. It was to go back home to reality and their careers and their jobs. And I said, whoa, isn't that interesting? I don't have one to go to anymore. That doesn't feel so good. I didn't miss the crowds, you know, all the crowds in the supermarkets and the traffic and all of that stuff, but I missed the children of summer out on the beaches, and I missed the people that, you know, the fun and the excitement that has happened in the summer. So I took a hit, you know. So when it came to the holidays of Thanksgiving and Christmas, we had some great times with family and friends, and but occasionally I'd run into people who would say, well, now that you're retired, what are you doing? And I tried to work up a pretty good answer. You know, well, I'm reading these books, and I'm working on these projects, and I'm doing this, but it felt hollow. And so anyway, we got back down to Florida again the spring of that next year. And then when I came back in April, I said, I got to do something. I can't just play around. If I'm going to be blessed with Mars longevity, going out to 97, I can't just do nothing. And so that particular a day in April, that year, I can still remember it. I'm holding the paper, and it's a job section of positions available on the Cape, and there aren't a whole hell of a lot of them. But I run into one that says, boat captain, Wequassett Inn. And I said, whoa, well, look at that. They need somebody, and they're going to pay money for it. And so I went and I dusted off my 100-ton Coast Guard captain's license, and I called them up, and I went over for an interview, and they hired me. So I said, holy God, you know, I've shed my corporate suits and all my formality, and I'm wearing a captain suit, and I'm commuting from Whippoorwill Circle over to Chatham. The income was minor, but the psychic income was major. I had been hired by a different company, different industry, using different skills, and damn, it felt good, you know, to be needed somewhere again. And so I had a great experience that summer. I loved it. And then come just about this time that year, they said, well, you've done a great job. We want you back in the spring. Boat's coming up. We'll see you in the spring. And so then I went home that night and I said, holy Christ, I'm looking at the walls again saying, what am I now going to do? And so it was about 3 weeks later when I pulled up, and it was not a Vantage, it was a Grand Circle travel catalog. And I started looking through these pictures of all these happy retirees, smiling, happy retirees traveling all over the world. And I remember the joy that I had working business-wise all over Asia and India and South America. And then Gudrun and I were blessed with travel in Europe and Scandinavia and China and Australia. And so we loved to travel. I got to the section that said they needed a group leader. So I called up Grand Circle Travel and said, may I have an interview next week? So I went up and interviewed in Boston, and they hired me as a group leader for Grand Circle Travel. So I took 40 people for a month to China and Thailand, and what a hoot of an experience that was. And when I got through with that, I came back, and then all of a sudden the paper, I saw the need for a teacher at Sandwich Community School. And so what I did is I went back to this little book that I'd written on The Secret to What's Next, Pursuit of Passion, and I taught that at the Sandwich Community School through that summer. And that felt pretty good. And then I called up good old Lee Hecht Harrison. I'd worked for them for 11 years full-time. And Lee Hecht Harrison, for those of you that don't know who it is, it's a small, career management company that helps all those people that get laid off from corporate America, from senior executives to welders, find new jobs and careers. And so I called up the head of the Boston office and I said, look, Ange, I knew him from prior projects that I'd worked with with him. And I said, Ange, I happen to be in the Cape now, and you know I love the company. You know I can do the group and the individual executive level kind of career counseling and helping people go through transitions. If you ever need anybody. And he said, Deane, can you hold for a minute? I want to shut the door. So he came back and he said, I can't believe your timing. He said, I just 2 days ago got a new contract with State Street, and they need to let go 300 people. So we need somebody that can come in, set up a 10,000 square foot career center, counsel senior executive officers, and give seminars to lower level people that are impacted. And could you start Monday? And so I worked for him. I worked back for them now as a consultant for a year, commuting from good old Whippoorwill Circle up to the Prudential Center. That part of the job I didn't like so much, but it was part of the turf. And so, but anyway, what I realized about then, I was doing some reading, and I realized that I read a book called, it's by David Corbett, called Portfolio Life. And what it said was, when we get to a certain age and time, we don't necessarily have to go on to another full-time something. We all have the option to do a variety of things part-time. So without knowing it, I realized I was a portfolio careerist, working on the Quasset Inn boat, doing Grand Circle travel stuff, teaching, working back at Lee Hecht Harrison on my terms, on my time frame, and putting together something that was terribly exciting, and it was almost more than full-time if I wanted it to be. And so that felt very good. Now, about this time, and this takes me on to a different story, but it's part of Flunked Retirement, but the different story is find a need and fill it. So I was working with Kaiser Permanente out in Oakland, and as I would commute to work, I would see these big Kaiser cement trucks going down the road, burly Teamster drivers, and but on the back of the truck, I'll never forget what it said, find a need and fill it. Not a bad thing, not a bad thing for a cement truck. But I used it for a different reason. I used that to help people find new jobs, that concept, and I used it to help consultants find new work. And so what happened is somewhere around 2011, I'm having dinner with Dick and Birgit Nelson here in Mashpee. And first of all, they, that particular night, said, well, you know, there's a new startup church coming in Mashpee. And I said, what do you mean? I've been going to 7 different churches trying to find a church home, but I'm a Congregationalist and I'd like to go to, well, it's local. And so we went and we joined the church, okay? But then the other thing that Dick did was he said, not many months later, he said, we got a little club called a men's club here in Mashpee. Why don't you come why don't you come check it out, see whether you'd like to spend a little time with it. And I said, oh, okay. I've never been a part of a men's group. I went to an all-men's college, Bowdoin, and I've been a part of a lot of all-men teams, but I've never been a part of an old girl. Al's only 93. Never been part of a group at this stage of my life, and wouldn't that be interesting? So I came here and I loved it. They had good speakers. They had very interesting trips. They did some things for the community. You know, I'll never forget the spaghetti dinners that all of us did, and some of our good friends that are gone did. We would put on a spaghetti dinner for the town of Mashpee for 200 or 300 people. And it was a real popular town meeting event, and we had a raffle. We gave away 100 prizes, and so it was but the more significant thing, other part about that was the punchline. We would then donate $5,000 to the Boys and Girls Club. Well, so it wasn't just a good bunch of guys where I would get some camaraderie and some stimulation through speakers and trips, but it was a caring group that wanted to help the community, and so it felt good to me. Well, somewhere around 2014, our beloved moderator, Arthur Traub, got sick and not long after died. And so when there was a call for people to lead the men's group, there were no names forthcoming. And so I said, well, maybe I ought to try that. I've never run a group, a meeting with Robert's Rules of Orders. I wonder if I could do that. And but that night in my being, I heard, find a need and fill it. And so the next day, I threw my hat in the ring, and by God, I was nominated the moderator. And I was in that capacity for 3 years. And I can say that was one of the more exciting 3 years of my elder career. The story, let's see if I can find it here, 285, the story about this find a need and fill it that thrilled me was not only was it an opportunity for me to have a significant role, but also I got to work with some terrific people on the executive team. And at that time, the executive team was, oh my God, there's McFarlane right here, Bob McFarlane. The executive team was Bob Clever. Maybe you want to stand up. Bob Clever, Frank Lord, Tony Cacuzzo, Bob McCall, Burke Johnson, and Ernie Cornelson. Ernie is not here today. But I had a chance to rub shoulders and work with these guys, and thank you. And I just want to applaud these guys for their efforts. Because it was very, very exciting. We went, and I just mentioned this not to brag, but to say what we did with a very responsive membership, and that is, this started in 1914, and so, 1914. That's why I'm feeling older today. Anyway, over 3 years, and so during those 3 years, we formed a talented executive committee. We had 10 committees with leaders and active members. We reinvigorated the club through proactive marketing campaign, including publishing a new newsletter, thanks to friend Berkeley Johnson, a new flyer, thanks to Frank Lord, publishing regular newspaper articles before and after speakers, thanks to Frank Lord, having the MTV start to record our speakers so we could get out the messages to the community and to potential members and those who weren't able to attend, thanks to Brad Sweet and others that were involved in that effort. And as a result of shifting from spaghetti dinners to a luxury raffle, we increased our contribution from $5,000 a year to $30,000 a year one year. But the grand total for the Boys and Girls Club over the 17 years was $130,000. And I always said, this is our men's club's finest hour, how we pull together and do something for the greater good of many people. Anyway, it was a wonderful experience, and I can't say enough about the men's club. Wonderful to see so many of you here today. We know we've got a lot more members, some of which are unable to make it for health reasons today, some of which have gone south for the year, for the season. But it's a great group, and everybody I run into, I say, you ought to join. It's going to be of real value to you. Let me shift now to, one other thing I would say is, so in this portfolio life that David Corbett talks about, he says it isn't just work, it's also sports, it's also community, it's also your faith. And so I did get involved early on, during this period with the Master Congregational Church, and Jim Scoville, head Goodwin, and I lead the evangelism team because we were new, we were down in Pompanesett, not in the epicenter of the town, and so people didn't know of us. So we worked at helping grow that church. But we also got involved in the men's club and in the Boys and Girls Club, and so it was a lot of other non-paying types of things where I found giving back had tremendous psychic influence on me. I'm going to go on to one other story, and then I'm feeling something with the voice, so we'll maybe go from there, asking you what you would like to hear. On when is it over? Okay, let me ask you a question to the group, okay? What do February 22, 1980, September 26, 1983, October 27th, 2004, September 25th, 2013, February 22nd, 2017, and June 24th, 2017 have in common?
Please tell us.
Pardon?
Please tell us.
And so what I will tell you with, and I know you know it, it's just a matter of digging it out of the memory bank, same for me. February 22nd, 1980 was the United States Olympic hockey team's miracle on ice when the team of amateur players beat the heavily favored Soviet Union team comprised of professional players, scoring 2 third-period goals for a come-up-behind victory. Sports Illustrated named the upset the top sports moment of the 20th century. The U.S. team went on to win the gold medal by beating Finland in the final. I go on. Pardon?
That was done already in 1960 at Squaw Valley. We had to memorize that because there were 3 Harvard guys on that team. There was many classes at school. They made sure we knew it. But it had already been done, and it was rank amateurs, and...
Right. Yes.
Yeah, well, 1980 gets more credit than due. It was a great victory. It was the same kind of a thing. They beat Russia in the semifinals, and they beat Czechoslovakia in the final. You could look it up.
Goodwin, would you take that down, dear?
The book, please, in the next edition.
It's a lot like the thing we heard in Cuba on our trip. When something comes up about Columbus discovering Cuba, the Cuban guide we had says, how do you discover something when there are already people living there?
Yeah.
Thank you, Bert. Okay, October 27, 2004, the Boston Red Sox won the World Series after an amazing comeback from trailing the Yankees 0-3 in the American League Championship, winning 4 in a row to take the series by sweeping the St. Louis Cardinals in the World Series.
I waited a whole century.
Another one I loved is September 25th, 2013. became known as the greatest comeback win in international sailing history. Down 1-8 and on the edge of humiliating America's Cup defeat by Team New Zealand on the San Francisco Bay, Jimmy Spithill, captain of the Oracle, rallied his 12-man crew and racked up 8 straight victories as they stunned the Kiwis, who couldn't slow down their dominant comeback, winning the America's Cup 9-8.
You were there.
We were there. How do you remember that?
Oh, you told me.
Okay. We were there. We were at several. The other one that I don't remember, and neither does Goodwin, and you may not either, and that is when we ended up September 26, 1983. John Bertrand and his all-Aussie crew skippered the infamous Australia 2 with its controversial wing keel past Dennis Connor's Liberty to wrest the America's Cup for the United States for the first time in 132 years. We were there. We were not happy then. We were on a boat with a lot of Australians and we almost got thrown overboard. Anyway, these are examples of group efforts where the question, when is it over? It ain't over till it's over. We go right to the bitter end until we run out of time before we declare that it's over. Similarly, I've got a number of examples of individuals that have set records. And I'll just read one. Julia Hurricane Hawkins, 101, set a new national record for a 100-meter dash on July 21, 2017, as she stormed across the finish line at the USA Track and Field Championships. The Louisiana great-grandmother shaved 6 seconds off of the record for a woman's age over 100, clocking 40.12 seconds. The former school teacher took up running after her 100th birthday. Can you imagine that? Anyway, my point in this particular story, when is it over, is that the universal question for all of us is, when is it over? You know, if we're blessed with healthy, longer lives, how are we going to spend those bonus years? And I believe that for each individual with a unique set of traits, skills, personalities, and the options are endless. One vehicle that I've found to help me stay alive and keep getting excited about life is a bucket list. So my bucket list, as I said, the first one was to get back aboard this guy and take the helm rather than be up getting drowned in the bow. So I did that with 10 people from the Mashpee Men's Club last year in Newport. It was wonderful. The third bucket list item for me was to write this. I write that I was going to do this by September of 2018. And so I believe these bucket list items, how many of you have got a bucket list of some kind, formal or informal? Yeah, so I'm a believer in that.
I'm avoiding the bucket.
You're doing a great, and I must add that I know so many of you. And I know that many of you may have thought about it this way, but many of you have also flunked retirement. That you have not just settled down and played for your last 20 or 30 years, and you don't plan to, because you are finding there's too many exciting things to get into and get engaged with, and I salute you for that. I think it's vital. I'm going to tell one more story, and then I'm going to open it up. And it's a story of the boys in the village in the Himalayas that they all of a sudden one day came up with a question that they knew the old man of the mountain would not be able to answer. And the question was, and they got all excited, they practiced it. One of them was the old man, the other one was the questioner. And so before they went up to find him, they said, okay, the questioner said, sir, is the bird in my hand behind my back dead or alive? And they figured if the old man said dead, they'd let it fly away. If he said alive, they'd hand him a crushed bird. No way the old man could answer that question. And so they finally go running up the mountain, and they find the cave where the man is supposed to live. And, boys, what are you doing up here? We've got the question that you're not going to be able to answer. And, oh, well, come right in. And so the little guy gets up in front of him and he says, sir, is the bird in my hand behind my back dead or alive? And so the man looks him over and he says, you know something, boys? The answer to that question lies in your hands. And so it is with each one of us, you know, whether we flunk, when is it over, that all lies in our hands. And I commend you, and I hope you will all continue to take charge of your life in this wonderful time and make the most of it. I hope you've enjoyed what we've said so far. Thank you. Thank you. Now let me just ask two things. One of them, yes, dear. Okay. How was that? Oh my God. Well, it wasn't bad. I said a half an hour, right? 32 minutes. And I didn't practice it, because if I did, I wouldn't have had any voice left. So we have two options. One of them is questions. Second one is the categories, again, that all these other stories fall in: scariest, happiest, saddest, funniest, proudest, most profound. If you want to ask questions, which of those categories you want to hear a story told from the book, fine. If not, if you've heard enough. But Russ, what's your question?
It's not from any of your categories.
Pardon?
This is not from any of your categories.
Okay.
It's a general question.
Yes.
On the cover of your book,
Yes.
fantastic picture of you at the helm.
Yes.
Why are you wearing a tie?
Ah, good question. A number of people have said two things about that. I think I mentioned one of them. A couple of wise folks said, you were that young? But the reason I wore a tie on Commodore Enos Anderson's Lord Jim is because this is just like the Gucci yacht. He was the Commodore of the Boston Yacht Club in Marblehead, and he ran a formal, tight ship. So when we were out sailing on the trips that we went on, leading the Boston Yacht Club, this is the way we were dressed. As soon as he and his wife and family were off the boat, we were back in suits, bathing suits, that is. You know, so it was only during the official hours when he was aboard. If you didn't, you'd probably have gotten tossed overboard. Any other questions? Yes.
What's the story of your daughter? She died in a flood?
Yes, my Lord. My daughter, Derry, she was had finished her college at CSU in landscape architecture. She was doing great. And on the weekends, she liked to either horseback ride, or she would go down to the meadow in Aspen, in the fields where the hot air balloons got off. And she would help them get aboard, and off they'd go. And so one day, there was somebody that didn't show up, and so they said, Derry, there's a seat available. Would you like to go? And of course, she'd heard all these people from prior rides when they came down, talking so excitedly about the beauty of it and the sereneness and how spiritual that trip was. And so she immediately said yes. She went. And on that particular day, beautiful sky, and all of a sudden the black clouds came in from the west, and the winds howled and the aspens bent over. And so it carried the balloon and the basket into power cords, which slashed the cords, and the balloon went up and the basket went down from 200 feet, and all 6 were killed. She was 32 years old, a beautiful girl. If you haven't looked at it yet, I dedicate the book to her. Derry was a beautiful human being, and she'd done more than most people do in their life. She'd lost her job, she'd lost her boyfriend, she'd lost a lot of things, but she just kept coming back. And she was a beautiful person. And so it took a long time for me to recover from that, our family to recover from that. And it's funny because people that we have run into have lost children, or people who have lost their spouses. Sometimes they get embarrassed about weeping or crying at unannounced, uncontrolled times. And I say, don't ever be embarrassed. You know, I can remember meetings. I'd be at a big meeting with United Technology on a big project that we were doing, and all of a sudden I'd break down. And when people realized why I broke down, they said, go for it. You got to do that. You know, that's a real loss. And so, anyway, thank you for raising her so I could talk about her. Yes, Dick.
Aside from marrying Goodness, which was a good move on your part.
Thank you.
What was your proudest and happiest moment if you could put the two together?
The happiest moment,
And proudest.
other than,
Marrying you.
well, it's funny because I've jotted which ones are which, and my happiest moment was obviously the moment I laid eyes. I laid eyes on this one.
You were forced to say that.
I didn't want you to see through me like that, Al. No, but I'd had a good marriage, first 10 years, 3 wonderful children. I didn't want to get divorced. I never planned on it, but things just didn't work out. And so I went from 1960, 70 to 84 before I ran into the love of my life. And when I did, I knew it. And so, but the other happiest,
And proudest if you can put the two together.
and proudest, yeah. One of them was shocked in Manila. And what happened was I had been asked, because I'd been working all over Asia and India at that time, I'd been asked to give a presentation in Manila to the Philippines to a world conference, IFTDO, International Federation of Training and Development Officers. And it was on a successful implementation of a cross-cultural management system, because we'd been implementing this thing in Carbide. And so somebody had heard me in New York, and they said, we want you to be a part of the faculty over in Manila in 1979. So that was one of my proudest moments, to not only represent Union Carbide in a major world conference, but also to represent the U.S., because there were people from all over the world, and it was just a marvelous thing. I ended up, and the shocked in Manila part of it, to finish the story, I ended up, after I delivered that talk to about 100 people, somebody came in out of the audience, and it was the marketing general manager of Lewis A. Allen Associates from Palo Alto, but he was the head of the Manila office. And he said, Deane, would you stay for another day and give that same talk to the top 100 businessmen in Manila? And I remembered that I'd had a wonderful year with Lee Hecht Harrison, but they laid me off, last in, first out. It was a small company with 8 offices. Only one in the U.S. was Palo Alto. The rest were all around the world. But business had gone south in the year that I was with them, so I got called in by Lou, who was a high-ranking Air Force officer, and he said, Deane, LIFO, last in, first out. We have to let you go. Please pack up your bags and be gone this afternoon. And small company, no severance, no counseling, no nothing. And so I was really down and out, because I was sending alimony, child support, and all that stuff back to my wife and family. And but so anyway, when this fellow from Louis Allen in Manila said, I'd like you to do it again, when I remembered the sting of being laid off, I was ready to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And then I said, but I bargained for time. I said, I'll let you know by 8 tonight. And so I thought about it, and I said, well, on one hand, I didn't like being laid off. On the other hand, if I hadn't been with him for a year, learning the principles and concepts and ideology of his management system, I wouldn't have been in that other conference the day before anyway, and I wouldn't have been able to get the other jobs that I did ever after that 1 year that I was with him. So I accepted it. And so I come into a different hotel that next day, canceling some other things so I could accommodate him. And I'm going across the stage in front of a pretty good sized group and start up, and all of a sudden, I feel the power surge from my head down to my shoes. And I thought I'd been electrocuted. You know, it was like a power surge because of a faulty electrical switch that sent power down through my body. And oh my God. So the people who sponsored me said, came up and said, 10-minute break, where's the doctor in the house? And where's the, where's the maintenance guy? And so after about a 20-minute break where they fixed it, and they said, it really is okay now. Are you okay, and can you continue? Believe me, I was nowhere near as spirited as I had been in the beginning, but we got through it. And but it was, so that. But the proudest was to represent the Carbide and the United States in that World Conference. Thank you. Pat.
Deane, I'm
probably one lucky guy who's had the opportunity to play golf with you. So I must ask the question.
Oh,
The
my
trophy, The golf trophy.
My
You
only,
explain.
this is going to be one more short story, I promise. And so I'm asked to work with Union Carbide in Mexico. And so for a week, I get called and they said, we need you to come down and help us build our 5-year strategic business plan. But we have got guys from 8 different countries here, and they don't get along well as a team. So is there any way you can help coalesce this team while we build the plan? I said, sure, we're going to put on the video cameras, and we're going to study what happens, and then we're going to critique it every day until we figure out what's going on and how we can correct it. And so we're in the second day of that conference, building the plan and all this, and all of a sudden the power goes out. So I said, well, what are we going to do now? And without any words or anything, everybody went like this. Everybody went like this, okay? And so I knew where I was going. And on Sunday night, at the beginning of that conference, they had been standing around having drinks, talking about their prior meetings of this group from South America, and everybody was bragging about their golf game. Well, see, I had no golf game, so I had nothing to brag about. And so I was very quiet, very quiet. And so the next morning, when this happened, you know, the president of Union Carbide Mexico grabbed me literally by the collar and he said, I want you in my foursome. We want to keep talking business. So now I'm with the top 3 guys out of the whole conference, and they dressed to the nines. They looked beautiful like professional golfers. They had hats and shoes, and yeah, you know, everything was perfect. The huge bags and all the right clubs. I had read the resort brochure and I saw they played tennis, so I was in my tennis shorts with a t-shirt and sneakers and no hat, no gloves, and so I looked a little bit out of place in that particular foursome. And we all know, because this is my only golf story, most golfers have got hundreds of stories. I got one. And so anyway, so we get there, and now I'm in the first foursome. We know when it's the first hole next to the resort, and the other teams are around. Everybody, this is where the pressure is, if there's ever going to be pressure. Everybody's looking at it. And I said, God, the legitimacy that I had with this group for the first day and a half is now going to be totally destroyed when they see what a fool I do on a golf course. So up gets Enrique, the president of Mexico. And so he does some practice swings like, oh, God, you know he's going to send this thing a country mile. Well, finally, he gets over next to the ball, and he splashes into it, and it goes. We know it's a good crack, but nobody can find it until it comes down 10 feet in front of him. So I go like this, not wanting to make him feel bad. And long story short, the next guy, big Jim Smith from Lindy, Argentina, about 6'8", big guy, big swing, looking equally professional. He slams into his. It goes 200 yards, but it goes off into 3 fairways over, so it's out of bounds. Next guy, all the other way. And so I say, well, there's no sense in my practice swinging because it's going to do nothing for my game. and so I just get up there, stare at that ball and say, you're going for a ride, buddy. And whoa, I get under it, and around 50 yards, it starts climbing. So I get a beautiful drive. I chip up onto the green, and I birdie it. I drive it in the hole, so I'm winning on the first hole. I'm winning on the second hole. I'm winning on the third hole. And now they say, that sandbag Turner, he wasn't talking Sunday night. Now he wanted to set us up for money. Oh, and so we get to the fourth hole, and my ball goes out of bounds. And when it comes in bounds, it goes right into a sand trap where I can spend an entire day getting out of a sand trap. It looks the most ridiculous. So anyway, my game went south. Theirs went north, and when we had a beer, we said, okay, wasn't that funny? But anyway, to answer Brad's question, so my game has not improved that much when I started playing golf with the men's club. Dick Nelson and Burke can attest to that. I'm very erratic because I don't play enough. But it happened last year, in the spring of last year, we had a little 18-holer, and my game was equally erratic until we got to the green where they measured the longest putt, which was, Chuck, it was about 50 feet?
Well, no, it was probably
75, maybe.
Chuck was measuring the things. And at the end of it, I won. And so it's the Mashpee Men's Club putting champ, 2017. When I brought it home to Gudrun, what did she do? She broke down. When I show it to anybody, they break down because they know my game. But I had to bring it. Thanks for seeing it. Any other? Yes, Chuck.
You and Goodwin have always been so generous. And you asked me, how did I know that about the America's Cup win in San Francisco? Well, as is your want, you invited a whole bunch of people to go.
That's right. Oh, I do.
Yeah, I don't think anybody took me up on it, but we all remember, and I remember watching those every.
Oh boy, what a comeback. Oh my God. Wow. Wow. Any other questions? Yes, Al.
You led such a varied life. You had many, many jobs, and you did all kinds of things.
Yes.
Most of us were very prosaic. For instance, I worked for one company all my life.
Yep.
And there's a big difference between what you say and my experiences.
Yes.
I enjoyed what you said because it's so varied and so interesting, where I don't think mine would be anywhere near as close. But I still retired and spent 20 years in retirement, and I'm busy every single day.
That's the key. Those of you that don't know this guy, Al Benjamin, he floored us by sharing recently his age, and I'll let him tell if he wants to. But he stood up here for damn near an hour, maybe 5 years ago, talking about how, as a bombardier navigator in the Second World War, how his plane won the war. And there was no wishy-washy about it. It's how they won the war. And Al, do you want to tell us how you? But no, I think he's got a very, very varied, interesting life because.
Don't tell him too much, please, because he and I are talking about his coming back very soon.
Oh, okay.
Hey, you can tell them about the little play I wrote.
Oh, you tell us.
You tell them.
Well, anyway, what it is he put together, on his crew, and they'd stayed in touch for many, many years, and several of them are gone now, but in his crew, they ended up doing a bombing of a particular thing, which I guess I can't spill the punchline. But anyway, so it was a crucial thing that they hit, which caused things to change, and they won the war. I'm going to leave it that general, okay? But anyway, what he handed me back about 6 months ago was he said, oh my Lord, I have now put together a little 3-act play reenacting what happened to our crew and what happened. And he said, is it possible that you would be able to facilitate my maybe reading it or having it turn into a little production at the Katuitt Center for the Arts? So I've been trying to get to Steve, the new director there. You know his name, Kuhn or something like this. Somebody knows.
David.
And I haven't heard back from him, but he's written a very interesting 3-act play on that experience. So I'd say you have had a very interesting life. It's not the number of companies, it's the number of things that you get into. And I would also say that for any of you that aren't sure you've got the enough of a story to put together a book like this, I'm convinced that you all do. You all have had wonderful experiences. We're blessed with it, and it's a matter of recall. And I'll say one other thing. On my recall for my stories, I then finally ended up working with an editor out of Palm Springs. And boy, was she good. But she also, if anything that I said was not totally accurate, she called me. She had no trouble cleaning up any, which was what you want it to be always. Anyway, thank you very much. And by the way, many of you have already bought a book. If anybody else is interested, Goodwin and I will be at the rack. They're $18, $16.95 plus tax. And there's some that have bought it, but I haven't signed it yet. So we'd be happy to do that for anybody else interested. Thank you.
Thanks.